right, 6:30, I call this special meeting of the Livingston City Council for February 22nd, 2022 to order. Acting City Clerk, roll call please.
Councilmember Driscoll.
Here.
Councilmember Milliman. Here. Councilmember Valdez.
Present.
Councilmember Barr. Here. Councilmember Grove.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ryden.
Here.
Mayor Schlachter.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum.
All right, thank you. So we have, one thing on the agenda tonight is, an executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session?
Mayor, we move to executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-4024FL and Article 3, Section 27 of the City Charter for the purpose of discussing city manager recruitment strategy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Valdez, a second. All right, we have a motion, a second. Any discussion? All right, we'll just do a affirmative thumbs up to move into executive session. Affirm. All right. City Council has voted 7-0 in favor of going into executive session for the purpose of discussion of city manager recruitment strategy. No formal action can occur in an executive session. At the conclusion of the executive session, council will return to the special meeting. We are adjourned into an executive session.
Upstairs, police training meeting. You don't have to say you're coming back.
We'll come back.
But you didn't come, isn't that something to say? Turn it, like.
we are reconvening the special meeting, and with no further business, we are adjourned from the special meeting at 8:23 p.m. So we will pause for 15 seconds for station identification and open the study session at 8:23. All council is present here, and tonight we've got two topics for the study session here. First, we have a Littleton Village update, and that will talk about the American Rescue Plan Act and then financial update. And so for Littleton Village, we're gonna have kind of two discussion items. One kind of very specific and one a little broader. We'll talk about the sinkhole issue, and then also about the kind of the commercial development area issue. And that might be a little bit broader than the sinkhole, so I'm gonna turn it over to Mark, who will probably switch to someone else.
Right, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so let me just add a little bit to what you shared there. On the road settlement issue, staff does have a specific recommendation that I would like council to provide some direction back to staff on you want to proceed with that. Then the other issue is a conversation that really started last year. We were before council in the spring and the fall, and we were talking about just the status of the commercial area in Littleton Village. And as a follow-up to that last conversation, we had proposed to council to do some work here with a consultant to try to dig into a few issues here. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Kathleen Osher, Community Services Director and a member of the City Manager's Office, and she's gonna make some introductions and kind of kick off this conversation.
Yes, thanks, Mark. So good evening, council, good evening, mayor. Kathleen Osher, Community Services Director. I am joined this evening by Keith Reister, Public Works and Utilities Director, and then also Bruce O'Donnell, President of Starboard Realty. So we did engage Bruce and his firm, based on their experience of working with metropolitan districts, financing public infrastructure and other systems that really serve and support developments in communities. So I am gonna ask Bruce to introduce himself, share a little bit about his expertise, and then I think after that point, we'll just kind of share with the agenda of how we're gonna go through this evening's presentation. So Bruce, if you'd like to introduce yourself,
Okay.
please.
Thank you, Kathleen. Hi, I'm Bruce O'Donnell with Starboard Realty. Thank you for having me this evening. And I'm hoping that when we get through this, that we can have just an iterative dialogue and talk through issues and be real open about opportunities for the city with regard to Littleton Village. Real quick by way of introduction, I've been in the land use and policy and development and infrastructure, finance and construction world here along the Front Range for 30 years. And I've been involved in the formation and management of over 70 Title 32 metropolitan districts and worked with all the district management companies and underwriters and all that type of thing. I also get involved in a lot of master planning and land use and entitlement and zoning and all that type of work. And so when I was contacted by Kathleen, I felt this was a good fit, and I'm happy to have had the chance to work with the city and hope we can have a good discussion this evening.
So as far as the objectives for our report, really understanding, we've had some conversation, most notably in 2021 in both May and November about some of the issues that we had seen at Littleton Village. We've heard from members of the metropolitan districts and developers there about an overly burdened property tax valuation and review, really understanding the metro districts in their current setting. They also understanding what was happening with future development, how that lines up with the economic development strategy at the city, both market demand and then sort of what that policy and regulatory framework looks like for Littleton Village. And then, an opportunity to work with someone that specializes in this to understand, are there opportunities to facilitate economic development that fits in with what the city would like to see happen, primarily citywide, but how Littleton Village could help play a role in that. So I'm gonna ask Bruce to just kind of dig in on this first point, and then, so we've got in front of us the assessor property valuation.
Sure.
And what we were able to discover as part of the process.
So I might start big picture a little bit
Yeah,
and then
please.
dive into that. I was asked to look into four primary issues that at the end of the day are also interrelated, all kind of becomes one holistic topic. And the first one had to do with potential concerns of the Arapahoe County assessors treatment of this property and the values assigned to property. And so I've had a number of discussions and meetings with the assessor and received a lot of Excel files and data from the assessor, and they've been very helpful. The second topic was to just kind of take a snapshot of what I would generally call kind of the health of the metro districts there and their kind of sustainability and viability. And I also was able to get some really good help there, in particular from Denise Denslow with Clifton Larson Allen, who's the district manager. I had a couple of discussions with her and she sent me a lot of information. And then I also looked at just what I would kind of broadly call regulatory and land use and policy issues that the city could deal with to perhaps catalyze Littleton Village. And then lastly, to maybe just kind of brainstorm ideas of are there roles the city could play to kind of step in and help things move along there. And so, you know, broadly, that was the assignment. So with regard to this first question about the valuations, this is newer to me than I'm sure it is to almost all of you. But there's disagreement among one landowner, primarily Jack Buchanan, and in the way the assessor has valued property here. And I have met with the assessor. They've shared, as I said, a lot of files with me. I've looked at comparable data on a variety of properties, and I'm confident that the assessor has treated this property just the same way they would treat any property in the county and in the city. And that I see no reason for concern that somehow property in Littleton Village has been treated differently or let alone unfairly. And in fact, I learned that the assessor has responded favorably to some protests and requests for lower valuations, and that's happened. And so we can get into it as much as any of you would like, but the conclusion is that I think that the assessor has done their job, complied with law, followed the procedures that they have to, and that nothing untoward or unusual has been going on in Littleton Village.
Can we ask questions as we go, or you wanna?
Sure.
So why the discrepancy? Is it because of the metro district? Is that
So-
why the property, I mean, why have we heard this for a long time? And now that we have an independent person said that this has not been happening, where is this coming from and are we going to get people coming back to us and saying, no, this is not true?
You may get people coming back and that would disagree with the conclusions I've reached. I would say that the real topic is that property taxes are high at Littleton Village.
Because of the metro district.
Because of what the total combined mill levy of all the taxing entities to include the metro districts. If you look and I have this data, but the total combined mill levy is 148 mills and change in one district and 155 mills in the other. And so that leads to higher property taxes than perhaps across the street where they might be, you know, under 100 mills, say. The other big factor is property values just generally are rising in recent years. And, you know, raise your hand if your property taxes have, you know, held steady or gone down, right? No one can, and so, I think that it's an issue of, generally across the board, high property values, combined with the mill levies, are more responsible for this issue, in my mind, than the assessor's methodologies.
Okay, thank you.
Having said that, if the assessor gave lower values, the taxes would come down. And so this has been a path that's been pursued to try to get some property tax relief, by trying to get the assessor to change methodologies.
Thank you. I mean, it makes sense. It's just, after hearing this for so long, it's like,
But we've only heard it from really one person,
right, and now I want,
and
now,
that's the interested party that wants it lower.
right.
Okay, sorry, what's up next?
So just describing the three
Sure.
districts.
So, when Littleton Village was originally getting entitled and coming under development, 3 districts were created. And they're districts 1, 2, and 3. District 1 is a very teeny parcel of undevelopable land. It's kind of a postage stamp type of a property. And I talked with Mr. Buchanan today, and in his word terminology, that district has been closed down. And the city might wanna look into that. The proper procedure for that would be to petition the district court to have the district dissolutioned or dissolved. And that has to happen for it to literally just go away. And that might be of interest to the community in terms of just housekeeping and not having some stray district out there.
What's the purpose of District 1 with it being closed?
So originally, there might have been a couple of purposes. Often when there are multiple districts serving a single development, there might have been an idea to have a commercial district and a residential district, for example. Sometimes it's done to address phasing and where subsequent phases of development could come into a district that becomes active later in later stages of development. And then sometimes there's what's called just a taxing district in an operating district, where a district, all it does is impose taxes and pledges them over to an operating district. And so I think the reason there are 3 districts was to just originally to provide some flexibility. And for whatever reason, District 1 has just never been active.
And so there's no purpose for it, so it can.
Right, and Mr. Buchanan acknowledges that and as I said, told me today that it's closed down.
I have a question for Reed. Reed, is there a requirement that the city has to be notified of a closeout?
There should be the petition process to formally close out your metro district. Yeah, I'll have to go take a look pull the documents and see what it says in there.
It just doesn't magically go away, and it just.
I think if the petition for dissolution begins and it's headed towards the district court, the city would be in effect like a referral agency that they would check in to say, you know, are you okay with this type of a.
I guess hearing from Mr. Buchanan, saying, oh, it's done, it's over, doesn't give me a warm fuzzy.
Well, it certainly, it's inactive, certainly, it's not imposing a mill levy, it's not collecting taxes, it has no revenue. It's kind of a placeholder district today. I think it's clear that it's his intent to just eliminate it through this dissolution process.
But he told you it was over. I guess I would just want it to be official, I want it official.
So, Mr. Mayor, did I answer your question? Okay. So then there are districts 2 and 3. And District 2 is 100% built out, all the property is absorbed, and it's generally east of Logan Street. It's 100% residential property. And the only piece in District 2 that's west of Logan is the Century condos. Is that map? No, okay. And so District 2 is now under homeowner control. So it's transitioned from what we would have originally called a developer district to one that's controlled by the community. And District 2 is the real active district that has issued debt. It has 3 different series of bonds outstanding. And it imposes taxes and fees both for debt service and operations. And it has ongoing operations and maintenance obligations within the district, for example, the park and snow removal, all those different types of things. And in fact, the settlement would typically be a district responsibility for O&M because the streets have not been conveyed to the city to own and maintain. District 3 is in a relationship with District 2, similar to what I was describing when I answered the why are there 3 districts question. And District 3 is primarily a taxing district, and it has contractually obligated itself to pledge all of its revenues to District 2. And so District 3 also imposes a debt service mill levy and an operations mill levy. And when that money comes in through an intergovernmental agreement, IGA is a lot easier to say, that money flows to District 2. And the money in both districts that is generated through the debt service mill levy can only be used to repay debt that's outstanding. And then the operations mill levy funds both kind of the general and administrative costs of operating a district. And then also, in this case, a lot of O&M for, like I said earlier, snow removal, landscape maintenance, those type of things. And so that's kind of the relationships between these districts. As I mentioned, District 2 has the outstanding debt, and I can't look backwards up here very well, should I
And it's
get
in
into
front
that?
of you too, if that's.
Oh, I can look up here, okay.
Share this.
So in District 3 today, other than the Starbucks anchored retail building and Culver's, it's all vacant land. And so that vacant land and the commercial buildings are, paying their taxes and contributing to the revenue stream that, again, primarily is funding District 2. And so District 2 has 3 tranches of debt outstanding. 2 of them are subordinate debt obligations. And then the most important one, really, I suppose, in some ways, is that the Series 2015 bonds are the senior bonds. And then there's 2018 bonds and 2014 bonds that are subordinate to the senior bonds. And often in a discussion like this of people trying to kind of sort out what's going on with these districts and should we be worried about widowed orphan school teachers that might own these type of bonds? The fact is that these are unrated bonds. There could only be purchased by what are called accredited investors. And they have to sign what's called a big boy letter in the industry, that they understand the risks and they're capable of losing money and they know what they're getting into. And so that's the case with all of this debt. And in fact, these bonds have minimum denominations of $500,000. And that's to protect small unsophisticated investors from getting in over their heads. And so one of the questions that often comes up is, should we be worried about these bondholders and what, gosh, they're losing money. And in this instance, my thinking is no, that they knew what they signed up for and they're sophisticated and they took the risk. And today, in fact, with most of District 3 as vacant land, the senior bonds are cash flowing. And District 2 has been able to meet its current debt service obligations on the senior bonds. The subordinate bonds have not had any payments due until later this year. At the end of this year is the first interest payment. And then at the end of next year is the first principal payment. And there will be insufficient revenue to meet debt service on the subordinate bonds unless more of this property absorbs in the district. And so one thing that my report speaks to and that we can talk about is that
When you say absorb, you mean produce income?
so when I say absorb, pardon me, that means that the land convert from vacant land to vertical development.
It's an income producer.
Right, in the vacant land is contributing to the tax base today, but not nearly as much as that same property will be when vertical development occurs and the property tax increases multiply. In my view, the most important key to the kind of the financial health of these districts and their ability to meet debt service or to get closer to meeting debt service down the road, and also to be able to perform their operations responsibilities, is all tied to an increasing tax base that can really only come through vertical development.
So when you said that District 3 is gonna pledge all revenues to District 2, so they're the taxing receiving entity, then they're just gonna pass through it
Correct.
to.
And so their
So right now, there's only 2 that they're actually receiving from.
so
Right.
2 developed properties
Starbucks
in Clovers, right, and then the vacant land as well.
Right.
And so one of the things we did is we ran 2 separate financial pro formas for these districts. And one assumes no new development ever. It's just a static snapshot in time of today. And what it shows is that District 2 can meet its debt service obligations with the current assessed values, the current tax base. But it on the senior bonds. And then we know the date of the train wreck on the subordinate bonds if no development happens. And that's December of 2023, when the first principal payment is due on the subordinate bonds.
What happens if they can't pay it?
So if they can't pay it, it just accrues. And it's kind of like an IOU. And so the subordinate bonds are like I said, they're kind of like an IOU, and the type of loan they have, the bonds as a form of a loan, it's really simply put, it's kind of the district is saying to the bondholders, when and if we have money, we'll pay you whatever we have. And so if debt service in 1 year was $1,000 and the district only had 200, that 800 would remain outstanding and would just continue to accrue interest. And those numbers, way down the road can get huge.
We'll pay you more now because we can't afford you can't afford to pay it.
But your
Or later because we can't afford it now.
And your conclusion is though, once it's built out, it's gonna cash flow fine.
It certainly could. I came up, I made up an absorption forecast based upon what's physically there and on activity that is in my mind likely to occur to build an increased tax base.
If certain things fall.
If certain things fall, and the one thing we all need to acknowledge today is it isn't going to happen the way I modeled it, right? It'll be different, but my modeling is indicative of the fact that vertical development kind of cures all ills, so to speak, on this debt. The third tranche of bonds, which are issued in 2014, I don't think ever get repaid. And they're held by an affiliate of the Watt, the original developer that purchased the property from Marathon Oil when they closed. And it's a classic developer note where the original developer kind of says, I might as well have a note against this property and maybe someday I get paid back. But I think that it's unlikely given the more senior obligations that are outstanding. These two financial models that we did also looked at the operations revenues and expenses. And the answer is very similar. Today the districts are running on a shoestring. They barely have enough money to cover the minimal operating expenses. And so there's I think that if residents and citizens are concerned about the difficulty in operating the district and keeping the park nice and picking up trash and snow plowing and those type of things, those are legitimate concerns. And again, it has primarily to do with revenues coming in more slowly than anticipated because of slow vertical development. And an increased tax base that would come through new development can contribute greatly. And in fact, our modeling shows that it could generate significant operating surpluses. If that were to happen, the district would begin to have options that it could consider. One, it could start to build a capital reserve for inevitably the next issue that comes up. Or it could also lower taxes and reduce the burden on the taxpayers in the district. And so again, that could be enabled. I have this broken record theme of that vertical development will help with all of this. So I think that's my quick.
Your vertical is mixed use.
Yes, and so we'll get to that in a second. I'm sure it's the next topic, right?
Yeah.
Bruce, sorry, can I ask a quick question about
Yeah.
the operating revenues? So is that holding steady or are they actually eating into reserves that they currently have in order to keep operations maintaining at a certain level?
I think it's holding steady and I can look real quick. I don't have a lot of this committed to memory, but
It's okay.
but they might have a few $1,000s of revenue in excess of expenses. But I think to achieve that, services are suffering. They're cutting back on O&M needs that among others residents would like to see a better job done on, I think.
So Keith, we're not doing any snow shoveling over there? Cause I thought at one time they said that, cause we are doing snow shoveling, that, their opinion, that means that we took ownership, and you were saying that that's
We're
not
gonna try not to shovel when we plow, so.
true. Plow.
Be a long day if we
It'd be a very long day.
We have some streets that we do, Phil Fernandek and I were talking about, we have ice build up at Hinsdale and a couple spots that we deal with. We do plow some of the primary roads, but they're on the hook for, pretty much everything else, alleys, all that kind of stuff. We do meet with their team annually to go through that.
So streets that the city has taken
That's correct.
possession of, that we maintain those.
Mhm.
And that's not the O and M responsibility.
Yes, it is. If it's our street, it's ours.
No, O and M as far as the District Two.
District.
Oh, no, probably.
Yeah.
Same streets.
Sorry, I
Okay,
was thinking about the sinkhole there.
You're off with shovels.
so I think, what's next? What's the next slide?
So just the considerations for.
So I think now we're at what was kind of my third topic. And that it has to do with policy and land use and regulatory decisions and might the city be able to address policy and respond to market opportunities that will facilitate this vertical development that I'm identifying as being so necessary. And I think you've already done a lot of heavy lifting in this category by undertaking the Envision Littleton effort in coming up with a new comprehensive master plan and the new unified zoning code. And in all of that process, which you know better than I, had robust public engagement and community outreach and public input. That has in my view, kind of repositioned this property to be eligible for more mixed use development in especially to include residential development west of Logan Street, which the current entitlement prohibits. And so this property has a GPDP, right? Did I?
GPD.
That one's always a mouthful for me. From 2013, that has really kind of shrunk wrap all the property in District 3 into a very kind of antiquated zoning and entitlement package. The world has changed a lot and it's too prescriptive, it's not flexible enough, and the market will never respond to it.
And that's the development plan that was approved back in 2013.
Yes, and I honestly believe that if that isn't removed, that this land just expected to have a chain link fence on it for the next 15 or 20 years. Because that existing entitlement, it requires certain building footprints, and it's like, I used the term shrink wrapped earlier. And it provides no flexibility that the market could respond to.
Question, how does that get removed?
So I might defer some to Kathleen on this, but the whole Envision Littleton process and the Unified Zoning Code, this property, the vacant property today, now has new underlying zoning on it. And it's a little bit of kind of a placeholder zoning now that the city has allowed or has promoted. But in order to access it, an applicant would have to request that this old zoning be extinguished. Or I don't know if there's is there a proper legal term for the?
Yeah, in order to come out from under the existing GDPD, they would probably have to do a master development plan, which allows for them to kind of leave that current zoning that they have established.
Would that lift it off all of Littleton Village or just their property?
It would just be the property.
So the PD would not pertain to that little section, which is what Amley bought.
Well,
The western third of the property.
depends on what it would be,
Yeah.
I mean, who, if they request it, which parcel.
Yeah, I think
So the applicant has to.
yeah, that this would be an applicant driven process.
Okay.
That the city would respond to.
And we don't know if it would be just that area or the whole PD would be removed.
I'm guessing you're right,
We
that we
would
don't.
not have the ability, well, let's be careful with that. The city has the ability to comprehensively rezone properties, as we did when we went through the future land use map and, you know, we got all these different numbers and acronyms on the board. So it would have to be property owners that would be petitioning for removal of that underlying PD.
Just in their
So I could not,
area.
as a property owner, affect you next door, I can only affect what I own.
Okay, and then this goes back to the ULUC. This land we're talking about that's under discussion is commercial mixed use now. It's already been zoned that. Is that in conflict with the PD?
Yes.
So the base zoning of the zoning map throughout the city and the base zoning that's there, the underlying zoning is corridor mixed use. But the GDPD still governs the property. And then what is identified in the Unified Land Use Code is there is both a process and then it identifies who could apply for that change or removal of the GDPD.
You lost me. Okay, so the PD defines this area that we're discussing as commercial, but the ULUC defines it as corridor mixed use, so they're in conflict.
Not,
The preceding one, it still overrides the
GDPD is still in effect
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
property.
Right.
So,
so there's no
Yes.
conflict.
yes and no, they allow different uses, there's two different.
I think this is the right answer.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's one overlay is, which one's the senior one, the PD or the UC?
PD is the one they're operating under, that's what, that's.
So the PD says commercial, ULUC's corridor mixed use.
Pinch hitter.
Wait.
Help, help.
No, that-
So,
Correct.
so now we go with the PD,
Right now.
You have to,
Currently,
that's where we're
Property
stuck.
is governed by
the PD.
Do you
Until-
remember last fall when we had this discussion? I remember Scott Mullen said, I can't remember, I think it was to Jack Buchanan.
make an application.
He said, make an application for a rezone.
I mean,
Where is it? Like,
Still.
come to us.
and while we have different names for things and different processes and different criteria, it's really not that much different than what we saw, say, with Evergreen, or what we saw with Aspen Grove, where there are existing PDs, and they went in through a PD amendment. In this case, I'm gonna confuse this because that's a PD amendment process, but that is the ability for a property owner to change certain uses on their land. So that would be going from the GDPD for property that they own to this, master.
Needs more housing and the market is ready to provide more housing. And so an applicant-driven rezoning to allow residential would absorb this land as I've been describing. And vertical development occurs, the tax base increases, and it begins to cure the ills that are plaguing Littleton Village through the increased tax base.
But it starts with an application, that's the holdup.
It does, yeah. And one of the things that I did in the modeling to be conservative is I assumed on this the 8.5 acres that it happens now that Amley has purchased. I assumed that all that happened there was multifamily residential, which is the lowest tax base that can be achieved because the assessment rate is a quarter of that of commercial property. And even that really helps, it makes a big dent.
Can you say that again?
Yes, so in Colorado by statute, commercial property is assessed at 29% of its actual value. And then it fluctuates because of the Gallagher amendment, but right now residential property is assessed at 7.15% of its actual value. And so commercial property therefore generates about 4 times the property tax than does residential. The problem is if it stays commercial only, it's just gonna be vacant land forever.
And that's residential if it's owned by individuals, or does it not make a difference, whether it's,
It's also apartments, it's all residential. So apartments, condos, townhouses, single-family detached housing is all assessed at that same, just north of 7%.
So Amlay purchased this property thinking they could get a rezone.
Hoping, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think, yeah, so let's talk about that.
Because they're not a commercial. So they're
Yeah.
residential, right?
So.
Well, and the corridor mixed use, just to be clear, is not a residential only zoning, right? There are clear specifications of what that mix would look like in corridor mixed use, but.
Is it commercial and residential?
So, I think it's a fair, question or assessment that they purchased this in anticipation of being able to accomplish this rezoning. And I think the primary reason for that is this whole Envision Littleton process where the city has telegraphed the desire and you have adopted policy and in fact you've even gone so far as to put underlying new zoning on this property, telegraphing to the market that you're open for business for mixed use development to include residential. And that was done, as we discussed earlier, with very robust public input. And so I think that's a big driver of Emily's decision. They also, and I cannot speak on their behalf, I've never met an employee of Emily, I don't have a relationship with them, other than they agreed after an introduction of Jen's to be interviewed by me for this assignment, and so I've had a couple of phone calls with them. But anyway, they're a risk taker, you know, they've assessed the political risk here, and they've it appears to me determined that they think they could be the applicant that could get this done.
Under the new zoning.
And just to comment on that, and maybe the city attorney can correct me if my Google University law degree doesn't fit here, but.
I have one of those.
To correct on some of the things that have been going around in the community, that Emily purchasing the property was not illegal. There's nothing illegal about someone buying property. Now, if they were there to go and start building houses right now, that might be illegal, but just purchasing property, there's nothing wrong with purchasing property, as long as what they do, they go to the
Your
property.
Google degree is correct.
Thank you, Google.
I mean, the property's been on the market for a long time.
Right, I know, so I'm
So-
just, there's just this rumor out there that it was illegal for them to purchase it, which is, I
Well,
just wanna
and
say is
There's a
wrong.
frustration about the communication process, which kind of hooking on to what you're saying, does it need to be done? I mean, it's nice for the community to know the buying and selling that's going on, but or does that go through the city, does that go through the?
We don't have any
It's
I have
control
no
over.
control, I mean, yeah, it's a private
So-
sale, do you get any say
I
in
mean,
your neighbor?
Look, I can appreciate what residents in Littleton Village are frustrated with in terms of both the operations and maintenance, some of the commercial not coming in, some of the vision of what was supposed to be there not actually coming into fruition. Littleton Village is not like other developments that have come in where, you know, at the time when you're doing phase build outs, you know, the vision or what's been sold, so to speak, called for this and that and restaurants here and there, and it just doesn't happen, and then it changes over a period of time. So I can certainly appreciate Littleton Village residents being upset when they hear that
A company that presumably has an interest in building residential is coming in and, you know, according to some, you know, the speculation is, well, they're gonna turn in, you know, this commercial area that's been sitting there and now it's gonna be more residential and that's gonna affect our property values, et cetera. I hear everything that is being emailed and sent and so I can appreciate that, but you know, what's going on right now has nothing to do with what the city is doing. This is a private developer who went out and contacted the property owners and purchased it. I mean, sometimes people buy and sell, sometimes people buy and hold. I don't know. They have not submitted an application to the city. We don't necessarily know what it is that they envision going there. Although with the ULUC changes, theoretically, assuming they meet certain conditions, they could try to go under the mixed use zoning, the corridor mixed use. If they met the criteria, if the property that they purchased kind of met some of the minimum requirements to allow for master development planning, that's a process we have.
And they'll go for an application if they want
And
to do
then
that.
that process requires public engagement, neighborhood meetings, so it's all very much spelled out in
Yeah,
steps that they
there'll
would
be
need to
neighborhood
take.
meetings, there'll be a public hearing in front of planning commission if they went through the master development plan route. Um,
That's only at the discretion of the community development director right now.
I guarantee you, she's gonna be referring it to the planning commission.
Yeah, I mean, we have certain changes that we're bringing forward. I think taking out some of the uncertainty surrounding that provision will clean that up.
And that current general plan development doesn't have an expiration date, is that correct?
That's correct.
So I would, or
That's
go,
a good
yeah,
question.
please, sorry.
There's a lot of talk about Amling, this company Amling. Is it presumptuous to ask you or staff, like, can they come to us and kind of tell us their vision?
Well, actually, council member, I think I wanna comment on that. I think when we get to the end here, and maybe Bruce, I'm not sure exactly where you're at in your presentation.
Let's jump to the end.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So I could feel that, I can toss
Okay.
it, I'll leave you want to, yeah.
I got my own 2 cents I wanna layer on, but I'd like Bruce to kind of finish his presentation.
Okay, well, so, one thing to kind of wrap up this discussion of the kind of the land use and the regulatory and so forth. I can't speak for Amly, but I can tell you that they and companies like them are not inclined to sit on this land. They can only make money if they become an applicant and come before the city. And when they do that, they're gonna have their hand out. And they're gonna say, we want to invest in your community, but we need a zoning change. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity, when that inevitably happens, for the city to work with all stakeholders here and get input from the residents of Littleton Village and from the other property owners and from city leaders and do some visioning sessions or charrette type thinking of what could this become where multiple stakeholders all benefit. I would hope that that's in the very foreseeable future for Littleton. But because now you finally have an owner that has to engage. The receiver, the foreclosure and the going to receivership, they're never gonna do anything. And so there's perhaps, and it's totally coincidental with the city taking on this analysis in my work, but it's serendipitous perhaps that there's an opportunity to take advantage of with them coming in. In a phone call, I've learned that their very early kind of conceptual thinking on this property would be to have on the north half of it roughly primarily residential apartment units with ground floor retail, and on the south half commercial. And so that if it goes with any significant component of commercial, that would be rather consistent with the current PD. And it would bring services and amenities not only to the immediate community, but to Littleton as a whole, potentially. And it also really helps with the tax base, as we discussed earlier.
I'm sorry, I zoned out for a second. Can you repeat what you think their plan is, north and south again, just real quickly?
north primarily residential, an apartment building, much like the one that's there today.
And then
With-
commercial only on the south.
On the south, and
Thank
and that's you know, a very early, you know, conceptual thinking. No one here tonight or listening online should take it to the bank, it's rumor.
Right.
But they're professional developers that already have a tremendous investment in Littleton Village and in the city. And it makes sense that they'd be a good partner, in my view, to continue that. So then, the very last part of what I was asked to look at is,
Do you wanna chime in on that part real quick?
Well, I really appreciate what Bruce kind of summarizes. I think, I think we have a very unique opportunity in time. We're surprised, certainly at the staff level, that Amley bought this. In fact, we got notification when the county assessor contacted you, Bruce, and then you shared that with us. So this is all very, very recent.
yeah, I got an email 3 weeks ago
Okay,
from the county assessor saying, hey, look what just came through the public records. And then,
It was all 8.1 acres or whatever it was?
Yeah.
Yep.
well, and if we just step back a second and kind of go into Reed's comments here, you know, the people that bought into Littleton Village here, you know, 2014 and beyond, yes, they were told a certain kind of commercial development was to occur, and it hasn't. And I don't doubt that they're very disappointed, if not angry about it. And so, and I'm just looking to you, Bruce, based on what your experience, you're just saying that the marketplace is just not gonna create that vision. You said you might as well put a fence around it and hang on to it for 20 years. So the existing development plan that we have is shrink wrap that thing, your words, to a point where I think all of us are gonna lose. If we don't think differently about how we can activate this property, then we're gonna be sitting on it like 20 years. And we have other properties throughout this community where that has happened. Columbine Square, we struggle with things like this, and I shared with the council before, I believe that's the challenge of our community for the future. Is we're gonna have to wrestle with parcels like this. Littleton Village is the first. So the question is, and I think the fact that we have a developer who has the financial resources to purchase this thing away from financial institutions who are just gonna sit on it for decades. They bought it. They want to activate this. So we have an opportunity to sit down with them and figure out, well, what can it be? Can we all win? Can the residents, can the metro districts, can the city, all of us somehow work through a process and actually find a win-win-win? I'm amazed that somehow this came together, because I was very pessimistic about a year ago.
Yeah, we have a willing owner, whereas
Yes.
Columbine, we do not.
We do not.
As Lou Saban would say, this is like half a loaf. You know, so that's what this boils down to. It isn't the full loaf of bread that the residents were hoping for.
Yeah,
But this is something that would be good still.
I'm very thankful, quite honestly, that we have seen an opportunity here. Now, what is it in the end? That's to be seen. So I guess I'm just layering on maybe the same thing you're trying to communicate to us, Bruce, but it seems like, wow, what an opportunity.
I think Councilman Barr has a question, but we're almost at an hour for this discussion, so I wanna kind of push things along.
Good job, Kyle.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about Amelie's District Two development, and especially the commercial occupancy, and because I know this is getting to District Three and the recent purchase by Amelie. The concern, I think, from a lot of residents is that in District Two, that the commercial development hasn't necessarily followed at pace with the residential development, so they're adding on more, you know, obviously they're becoming more financially viable with an increased tax base, but the services are not actually being brought to the community, and they're just barely hanging on by a thread in terms of like that operational and maintenance requirements. So there's not necessarily a guarantee that in District Three that this wouldn't also occur. So my question, I guess, for proposals moving forward, it does seem like residential needs to be part of this mix. That will need to be facilitated by other changes in planning, but in addition to that, we also wanna make sure that the commercial is actually backfilled by the developer, and what can we do as a city to actually make sure that the commercial is actually backfilled in District Two and Three?
Well, there's no commercial district here.
There's some.
There's some,
In
yeah.
the existing, Amway property that they have not.
Right, but that's, okay.
In the existing Amway building, there's about 9,000 feet of ground floor commercial space. And a small piece of that is about to have a restaurant and a first tenant. And so I think the city can play a role here. I think one of the struggles, likely in my view, is in terms of getting commercial to come into the existing building, is that and this applies universally. It isn't just Littleton Village, but Broadway is one of the biggest commercial corridors in the state. And there's vacancies and storefronts and buildings available for tenants, right on Broadway, readily. And so it's very difficult for a commercial user, in particular a retail user, to be a block and a half or two buried behind 8 acres of vacant land and have a viable shot at a business that's gonna succeed. And again, in my view, part of the remedy to that is more residents who want a walkable community and if we get some density and some activity and population there, Littleton Village itself could become a destination. Then I could move on now to my next section, not with broken streets.
Right.
Oh, what a great lead in.
Hold on.
Keith,
Well, I think the city manager wants to butt in here.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
just in the interest of time here, I think
Thank you,
if you had an opportunity, of course, to read the staff communication here, staff's recommending that we go ahead and proceed here with a fix of the Hinsdale Road settlement here, and roughly at a cost of about $300,000. Keith can get into the detail. I'm asking for council to, at least at this meeting, ask us to proceed. I'd be suggesting we fund that through ARPA, not ask for a reimbursement back from the Metro District based on all of Bruce's work. I'm not sure what the point would be, and we have the federal funds.
Okay.
I agree.
Say next.
Fast forward to the end. There you go.
The only picture you gotta show is the ducks.
Oh, he had one picture he wanted to
There you
show.
go. We love this picture. No, not that one, go more up.
Okay, I was like, that's
No,
not
one
the
more.
one.
Right there on the right, that's a picture of the
I've actually
ducks
seen that.
in the sinkhole.
Yeah.
It was actually a really nice wildlife feature there for a little bit.
When did we start that?
I know, we gotta do engineering, so.
Get that to freeze up so the kids have a place to play.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, would
We
that
have, we have at least 3 months of design.
You want
And
traffic on that
that's
street.
because of availability of consultants.
So 3 months and then what comes after that?
This, we hope, we should be able to get it done within 6 months.
Okay,
We start
just,
now.
it's just a guess, thanks.
Yeah, this, the previous council had that study session to wrestle with this. I mean, it's a bad situation all around.
That was before their ARPA funds.
Right,
Or
and-
price tag too.
and-
Yeah, it came in at a better.
Yeah, right.
You know, this is,
Right.
the best case in a bad situation. Not something we won't really wanna do, but it's
No.
like kind
well,
of what.
it
They're
makes
Littleton
sense.
residents and they need to be.
Yeah,
To the earlier discussion, we talk about some of the various debt that's been issued, just, in the proposed kind of agreement that we had made up, at least tentatively with Littleton Village, I mean, it was, once we go through the finances, the ability for the city to get repaid in a timely manner, it just isn't there.
30 years out or something like that.
So what are we doing with that?
Without interest. I had one question, Keith, and we go ahead and we do all those holes, things that you showed up there. And then, but then you said a possibility of restricting traffic on it other than emergency vehicles.
That was
What
a
did-
different option.
So
Is that a
we,
different option?
yes, we took a look at that, we visited with South Metro Fire. They would prefer to have that, as an access point. The development was originally designed with an access corridor through there. So we think that that's probably appropriate to stay with that.
That's where I was going, cause I would rather see it have traffic on it, cause if it's gonna have problems, I wouldn't want it to be
It's still
sinking.
gonna have problems. It's still gonna have problems, we're gonna fix this thing.
Well, this isn't the last time we're gonna spend money on that.
Yeah, I would expect this to shift in the future.
Do
We
a
have other
bridge.
roads in the
Do a bridge
community that
instead
are
of-
gonna do this. We have sections of trail mark that are like this, that are
So,
gonna continue
Are
to
we
share.
gonna have fire access for this?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
the road will go through it.
As well as
So there's a road,
residential.
not a park.
No, it'll be a road.
As originally designed.
Yeah, design.
Okay,
In the
no,
development.
okay.
So one of the things, I guess, going forward, Keith has mentioned, you know, we're gonna have to do the engineering work, that's probably about, what, $70,000 of that cost?
50 to 70.
So I will need to potentially have a discussion with Littleton Village. Right now, we haven't accepted the roadway, it's not technically ours, so whether they just convey it to us and we go about doing the work, or we get their permission to do the work and then ultimately they convey it to us, I don't know, kind of chicken or egg, we'll see what works out.
So this, 300,000 comes out of the 900,000 that remains.
Correct.
Okay.
And so at some point, either permission or we will assume responsibility for the road.
I'm sure that if we told them we wanted to go start working on it tomorrow, they would say yes, and we can
Take
put
it.
paperwork on later. Would be my guess.
They'd walk over the deed for that tonight,
There you go.
given the opportunity.
Correct.
Bill may
I don't think we wouldn't have ultimate responsibility over the road in and of itself. Like,
Well,
we
we're
would
supposed to
that
assume it
Yeah.
once it's
Yeah, we do.
up to
We take
par,
possession.
right?
Yeah, once we,
permanently?
yeah, all the rest of those roads are accepted
We'll
roads.
start
There's only
following
one
it.
stretch that's not accepted.
Because
Okay.
it
So-
didn't meet
Good.
criteria, so it's.
But
Normally
there would be a warranty
period and before we would take something, in this case, that's coming up.
And so eventually we'll probably.
So now our funds are down to 600,000.
Correct, and sorry, Keith, you had a great presentation, I
No,
just.
no, I-
That was the fastest presentation he's ever given.
No, I had a shorter one a few weeks ago. I'm still taking some heat for that, so, you know.
Anything else on this issue? You get direction from us?
I did. Now, go ahead, Pam,
Are
I'm
we,
sorry.
are we talking about anything beyond the sinkhole, or are we done?
I think we're done. Is there something else that
The-
needs to be?
The thing I wanted, we've got two recommendations, the sinkhole, right? And partnering with Amley, and that's gonna be their application. What I saw in your presentation, in your write-up, was some ways that we could help with bringing in more commercial. And I'd like to, some of the options I thought were good, like marketing, some of the options like purchasing land, I didn't think were a good idea, but I was hoping that staff would come back to us again with some options for the commercial portion.
That's what economic development's all about.
In fact, to your point, Pam, I think we would like to have our economic development department part of this conversation. Let's engage Emily, let's see what they're considering here. Yes, we'd like to maximize from the city's perspective as much commercial as possible. And I'm sure for the existing residents in Littleton Village, they would like to see the same.
Right.
So I think we have probably a common interest here, but all the other options we'll talk through here and see how they might be applicable. But even beyond that, and this is maybe what Bruce's point was, I think this is an opportunity for us to look at a whole bunch of different strategies over time. So like at the retreat, when we were talking about economic development, I think it is an opportunity for us to bring tools to a toolbox here and let council decide which one of these start to make sense under what application. Because we're gonna have I'm confident we're gonna be talking about Columbine Square and the Enser property and all sorts of stuff in the future here. So having a toolbox, I guess, is what I'd like council to understand and let staff maybe make some suggestions.
On a smaller scale though, when do you see that we'll have something come from economic development or community development about Littleton Village? It may be part of a broader, I understand the broader thing, but I just don't wanna let go because we have such good information and we're all have some momentum going.
Well, I suppose it depends on Emily.
Right, I mean, that's.
I'll bet you they're watching this tonight.
Well-
Any chance of a P4?
We don't have.
That's fine, right, yeah.
But beyond Amley,
We don't have.
there's still
You don't do that anymore?
more.
Oh, that's okay. Oh.
Yeah, there's two vacant retail paths on Broadway.
So what are the options to bring people in? We've looked at tax sharebacks and all this kind of, what I'm saying is we have some momentum going, we have some great suggestions in your write-up. I just don't wanna let those just fall away, and I don't know that all of those depend on what Amway does. I think they, yeah.
Point taken.
Application.
Yeah, point taken, yeah, we wanna make sure we look at all the opportunities on all the vacant property.
Right, and if it's just maybe some sort of marketing, I thought that was kind of the least intrusive, and there was other, you know, buying property and, you know, helping with bonds and all sorts of choices. I just was hoping that staff would come back with some options and not let this just be a report on the shelf.
Yeah, believe me, we would like to keep this engaged here. Yeah, Bruce was just flagging the kinds of things that he's seen other cities do.
Which is
So we
great,
obviously-
and there was just so many choices, I just don't wanna lose the momentum, and I don't know how to ask staff to keep that going
Well, I'll
forward.
look for the owner.
Maybe
Right,
some
that is
retail
engaging
marijuana up
the-
in Littleton
the
Village.
Go on, please.
Yeah.
On those other,
Pardon?
other pieces too, engaging with those owners, right? That own the land?
Uh-huh, and just not let it fall by the wayside, that's all I'm asking.
Good, let's move it.
Falls in their.
Alright,
Will work? Alright, thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Excellent
I'm
report.
around if there's questions or phase 2 or anything, let me know.
Who did Emily purchase it from?
It had been in foreclosure.
So that was part of the Littleton Village Holdings LLC, that one?
I think probably so. A lot of times in these big financial institutions, they appoint a receiver. And so I'm not exactly sure, but
Frankly, doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Alright, so next up, we got
Tiffany,
alright,
you guys
Tiff.
coming up to talk about ARPA and some financial update. Hopefully we don't need the 60 minutes allotted here.
No, okay.
yeah, I think while Tiffany's setting up here, we had set this date here as a follow-up to the council retreat. So once we got a little bit more direction about some of the proposals we talked through, the goals, action steps, objectives, staff took that information and started to narrow down what are the things that we want to specifically to approve here now. And that's what this meeting is about. And then there's also a larger conversation that we're gonna have in April where we're gonna have much more in-depth conversation about the remaining parts of ARPA and general fund and getting ready for the next budget.
that's, it's right in here.
The council
It's right on
remembers
this
that
corner,
conversation.
so that's the southeast corner. Here. I think they're working on some lieutenant agreements. It's in an existing building. Gotcha. Yeah.
How much of the existing District 2 commercial space is actually like currently planned to be occupied with that new restaurant going in? Are we talking like half of it,
I'd guess maybe a third.
maybe a third?
Yeah,
So it's still moving,
it's small.
it's small and moving slow, okay.
Do you know Social Bar and Lounge? That's the one that's going in.
Yeah, I'm excited for it, I'm just like,
Well, they probably, it's probably
Social bar and
permitting
lounge?
Yeah, that's what I.
this one that's on Pike Canyon.
So,
do to get the commercial development.
Mark, can you just tee us off? We're gonna talk about ARPA, you're gonna present some the carryover, which should be
Yes.
quick, and then some new budget as well. I think we should.
That's correct, yeah. Carryovers, if you remember, I sent a email out here a few weeks ago.
Makes sense.
We have a process that typically carries over from the end of the year, projects that are not complete, Tiffany will explain all that.
Alright, good. Come on, man, what are we waiting for?
Alright, sorry.
This is gonna be the best ARPA presentation yet.
I was gonna let Reed lead this discussion because he loves ARPA
We've
and is
spent all the
so
money.
excited about it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you.
but that's okay. I'll go ahead and kick it off. Okay, so we have three main topics tonight in our discussion. One is ARPA, and so this is just affirming council support of some of the categories that we identified during the leadership retreat, how we're gonna spend that, and then I wanna talk about how we're gonna communicate how we're spending it and the progress of those projects into the future.
Make sure we haven't changed our mind in the last 3 weeks here.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Always possible. The second one is related to 2021 encumbrance carryover appropriation, and I'll explain what that is. And then the third one is on the heels of requesting some additional general fund requests in January, we have a few others that we want to discuss with council as well. So our favorite ARPA. We've received about $12.1 million by the end of this year, we will. We've already earmarked 2.1 million. We talked about the remaining 9.9 at the council retreat in February. We're gonna come back to you in April with a study session to kind of give you an update of our financial position for the city.
And that is now 6.9,
Well,
if we go through this 300,000.
it'll be less than that.
Spend-
Then we'll have some discussions in September related to the 2023 budget, so we'll definitely be giving you an update then, and then quarterly reports throughout. We have to encumber it by the end of 2024, and we have up until 2026 to spend it. So if you recall at the council retreat, we talked about some categories. Staff went through, identified some unfunded needs. These are things that we believe fall under the ARPA guidelines, and we recommended those to council during the council retreat. We identified some categories: technology infrastructure, equipment, community, and then some new or increased services. What these categories are gonna allow us to do is just focus on some unique opportunities so that we can utilize these one-time funds. That's the purpose of ARPA. We wanna make sure that we're not adding to something to our coffers that we have to continue year after year after year, so we're really looking at those one-time expenditures. After we talked about these last, during the retreat, we mentioned that there's about 955,000 left after these categories. Do we wanna go through the list? No?
Good, I haven't changed my mind.
I haven't changed my mind.
I'm good.
Perfect, they're all in the council communication if you wanna go back and kind of peruse through those. Nothing has changed as far as that amount. Although, we do have one additional one that we wanna talk to council tonight about. So our recommendation is that we go ahead and appropriate the full 12.1 million. The reason for this is, you know, it's very difficult for us to start some of these larger projects if we have to continuously get appropriation, review the information, there's lead times. And we just think it would give staff more flexibility in actually carrying out these projects that we have talked with you about. So our recommendation is that we appropriate the full 12.1 million. We've identified up to 11 million already. We said we had 955,000 left. And the one thing that we did want to talk about tonight is a downtown senior project manager. We added some language in the council communication of what this person is gonna help with as far as the downtown area and some other special districts. And so we feel like this is an urgent need of the city, so we can continue those projects and start those discussions. So we are asking for a senior downtown project manager. It's about $133,000 a year. The plan is to fund it at least for the first year out of ARPA, and then we can look at the budget process to see if we need to continue ARPA funds or if we need to look to the general fund.
130, that's total compensation?
What's that? Yes, total salary and bennies, yes.
Is that Public Works?
This would be, I believe it'd be housed with Public Works, yes.
Would this be a full-time position or just something that would be used until the city gets Denver Water through, until PDA gets up and running, and what would a full-time senior project manager do?
Here comes Keith for us today.
For, in year 3 and 4, you know?
Well, I'd be surprised if we were done with construction in year 3 and 4 from today. So, yeah, I mean, part of the challenge with working in downtown is you need somebody with significantly more project savvy as well as experience, partially because of the folks you're dealing with in general. So we think the integration of that, and realistically, even if the DDA was created tomorrow, they're not gonna generate revenue for quite a while. So we're gonna still need to be a part of that, and realistically speaking, with the money we have, we're gonna be able to do a few blocks, but you got a lot more work to do down there, so it's gonna be a combination of that. And also, as we look to this mobility plan, it extends beyond just what a lot of people think of as Main Street, it's much bigger than that, so that's where we're headed with that.
So year 1 is ARPA funds and year 2 is general funds.
We will look to see if we can incorporate that into the general fund in the second, third years.
So it becomes a new expense.
Yeah, we're gonna have to, I mean, we do not, if we're gonna proceed with all this downtown work, we just don't have the staff to do that. going forward. And having someone more specifically attentive to that will allow us to really maximize opportunity, continue to support additional grant chasing, revitalize Main Street money and things like that.
This is only downtown, this doesn't have to do with the 3A project manager.
No. I mean, and the other part is, as time goes on, we have a few positions along the way that, we're gonna develop as they go along in the sense of the role that they play and what things they'll be initiated into as well.
And then to add to all that too, additional expenses, I think HR had said something about a 16% increase.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in the
Yeah.
general fund.
Right, I mean, that's how much money we spend so quickly. Understand why, I do, but it's amazing.
It is, yeah, and I think I'd suggest that we think about this as very project specific over a designated piece of time. So if as this thing evolves here, we'll look for other opportunities, but it could be that this is just at the end of 3 or 4 years, that person's done. So I think we just have to get going with trying to coordinate this particular activity based on the retreat discussion around downtown. So that ARPA allows us to kind of jumpstart this thing.
I think, and to add to that, I think, a couple of years from now, this is gonna be a position where there's gonna be some organic change in it over time. What it looks like and, all of a sudden it may be 2 years from now and maybe there's another big grant cycle or something happens and we do a bunch of work at, say, the interconnect between Santa Fe and Poles. There's a natural progression there. We're just, part of that'll be evolutionary over time.
Yep. It kind of goes into my thinking that we're all excited about 3A, but man, this money's being spent quickly. That's why.
Lots of needs, that's why we asked for it.
I know, but these are new needs. These aren't, we were excited, thank goodness we have the 3A.
I'll just be honest with you, as your public works and utilities director, if you wanna proceed with that downtown work, whether you call it this or you call it something else, you need support infrastructure to make that happen.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying, that these are expenses 2 years ago, we never really expected, and now boom, 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 60% salary increases thereabouts. New staff ongoing.
Well, in fact, to your point, Jerry, I think that's why coming out of the retreat, council wanted to see the complete picture here, because we've proposed lots of different pieces to kind of come together to address the goals. This April conversation's an opportunity for us to take these incremental steps we're talking about tonight, and then the bigger conversation about how all it fits is in April. Because we do have, the cost of wages, inflation, we got a whole bunch of things influencing the general fund and the rest of the funds.
Yeah, I think this is important. I support it.
Huge.
Yeah, and as far as going forward, if we have the appropriation, we'll add it to the March 1st budget amendment. And then what we will do is we will send back to council through memos, just the progress of all of these projects. So you can see what we're doing, how we're doing it. If there's any potential shifts or changes that we wanna share, then we will certainly communicate that to council so that you're aware of it.
What's the timeline for getting this person on board?
March 2nd.
March 2nd?
You just put a lot of pressure on HR right there.
Candidates already selected.
Yeah, no, we will go ahead and post it as soon as we have a job description. I would assume that we probably might be working on that. So as soon as possible.
Knowing Noelle, she's probably already got it hammered out.
It's in that folder that says once approved.
Yeah, we'll get this thing going quickly because if we're gonna progress quickly related to just the design for Denver Water, streetscape, mobility plan, all those things, the sooner the better.
Okay.
That's all on ARPA. Yeah, it sounds like everyone is supportive
Yep.
to move
Yep.
forward with that plan. All right, encumbrance carryover appropriation. Why do we have to do this? Every year we appropriate a budget, so general fund might be 45 million or 50 million. And so that's the appropriation. But then what we do internally is we issue purchase orders to encumber those funds. So we might have that much money appropriated, but we wanna encumber it. And that's just pull it out of that 45 million, earmark it for a certain project. Every year, we budget for projects, supply orders, things that just don't get completed in that budget year. And so we have to carry over that purchase order into the next year. We will have accounted for this in either our year-end estimates, so that we are planning for us to spend it, we just didn't happen to spend it by the end of the year. And so what we need to do is we need to reappropriate this in the next year's budget. This is an annual process, we do it the first quarter of every year. It's just best practice for us to do that. I included a lengthy list of all of the encumbrances that we plan on including in the March 1st budget appropriation, and it impacts a majority of the funds. So general fund, grants fund specifically, $5.2 million for the grants fund, just because we have those TIP grants that we're working on, and a number of others. ARPA's included in that. Open space impact fees, capital projects, of course, sewer and storm drainage, and property and liability. And I just have to remind all of us that, what we plan on is adding the general government funds to the March 1st budget appropriation, that we already have the budget amendment that's already scheduled. Due to timing and the way that we appropriate sewer and storm drainage, we're actually gonna have to do a first reading on March 1st with a second reading on April 5th. Not ideal, but just due to timing, we kind of have to pull those out and separate sewer and storm drainage. So again, March 1st, we will be appropriating the governmental funds. Sewer and storm drainage will be a second reading on April 5th.
Was there a fee increase on the sewer?
Yes, for 2022, we did a 3% increase, 5%, sorry, for sewer utility, and then a 40%, which is the third and final year of that 3-year phase-in for storm drainage. But again, these are projects or purchases that weren't completed in 2021 that we need to carry into 2022.
And I mean, you only do this when you haven't finished the project, when something's finished and you didn't use all the funds, obviously that's different.
Right, yeah, and some projects haven't started yet, and so you might see, there's not a purchase order number listed, but those are projects that we planned on.
And now with inflation, we're gonna have to find money to finish it off.
Hopefully not.
Well, hopefully. Hopefully I'll win the lottery.
So that's the purpose of the carryover encumbrances. All right, we're on to the third topic. I'm like record speed here this evening. So 2022 budget requests. So 2022 budget adopted in October of 2021. We amended it once in January related to police personnel costs and for the impact fees to finish the improvements to the city center. Just a note, we have additional revenues in sales and use tax in 2021, about 2.4 million than we had anticipated, and we told council at the budget sessions in September, if we have extra funding, we will be coming back to you asking for some additional requests. And again, here we are for some of those additional requests. One of them is an asset technician. This is related to a couple of things. We did the cameras. I can't remember the name of the project, but we use the cameras to identify all of our sewer and storm drainage lines over the past 3 to 4 years. So now we have an inventory of those, and now we have to manage that inventory of those and make sure that we add new ones and identify any other additional ones that pop up. And then we also, have 3A coming on board, and so we have additional infrastructure throughout the city that we're gonna have to manage and maintain as well. And so we have a request for an asset technician that will be funded 50% from the general fund and 50% from the sewer and utility fund. So the total is $133,000.
Why does it have to be split from those funds?
So this person will be managing the utility side, the sewer lines, as well as just general government infrastructure. So not only streets and roads and bridges and signals, they'll also be managing the sewer utility. And so we need to allocate those costs of that personnel to the sewer because they are based on rates for that particular service that we're providing. So we want to make sure we keep those allocated as much as we can.
And the sewer utility fund has lots of money.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering
We're
why it's
still
only
not
three.
doing
That,
3A
but-
Because
yet.
they're doing stuff
No,
in city,
but-
general city as well, so it can't be 100%.
Sorry, Mayor. Pam asked a very good question. The half coming out of the general fund, quite honestly, is trying to manage the assets so that we understand its condition, so we are ready for 3A. So that work will spin off into the conversation in the years to come for the council to understand, well, what's the priority when it comes to some of the maintenance of curb, gutter, sidewalk, traffic signals, that kind of thing.
Asset management's a good
Asset
thing that
management.
we haven't spoken in this city for
Is, out of
60 years.
curiosity,
Correct.
That's Keith
is the
spoke about it.
project manager
Well-
for 3A gonna come out of 3A or someplace else?
So the project manager for 3A is out of the 3A funding, but
Okay.
this position is not just 3A. A portion will be 3A, but the majority of it will be utilities and other infrastructure.
But this is coming out of the general fund.
Yeah,
Yes.
and, we had this conversation internally here, and, the council doesn't have the policy yet for which staff can be associated with the 3A capital funds. So we believe that it's a reasonable recommendation here that it just come out of the general fund, half of it. Now, over time, council, I suppose, could change that, but I think just as we set up the conversation for 3A general fund seems most appropriate today.
So it's general fund, not 3A fund,
Correct.
or the 3A project manager.
This
No,
is just
just
asset
this one,
technician.
that one.
I'm gonna do a cliff notes, I feel like, for all of this, just because there's so many moving pieces and numbers. The second one that we talked about with council at the retreat is a market analysis update. We are not immune to the very issues that other businesses and organizations are experiencing right now, and also retention and hiring. And so Noelle is
Why don't you come on up, Noelle?
here.
She's been doing some work that was running parallel in time as we were putting together the retreat here, so we have a better understanding of what we're facing on the cost of salaries. So that's what this request is all about.
Yeah, you guys got the sneak peek a little bit earlier today. So in the budget, we did put a projection of what we thought it might be. However, as you know, this is a bit of a wild ride in this labor market. So we really focused our energies, did complete market analysis. We looked at it several different ways. And this request is asking for an additional 0.75% to give to our employees for salaries to help us to remain competitive. And then we're also asking for this $175,000 in one-time monies, and we need that to be able to be responsive to the market. People are coming in with job offers already in hand, so it's definitely an employer's choice, and we use these funds for things like a hiring incentive, or when an employee comes to us and says, hey, I've been scooped by another organization. We work with them, what's meaningful to them, what will help retain them, and our ability to move very, very quickly is really paramount. This is not done in a vacuum though, right? Any of those funds, we're working in partnership with the finance department and the department director, because we want to be really thoughtful about, man, it's a great solution for this employee that could lead to poor morale or turnover in other places, right? So we want to take this holistic approach, use facts and data to help support our decisions, but also have the ability to move very, very quickly. The one-time monies are great because it's not add to base, so it is just the one-time monies that are helpful. A lot of times we use things like developing certification programs with CertPay, different opportunities for employees. So we work very, very closely with the department heads to figure out the right solution. Had pages and pages of all the things I could tell you about all of our different tools at our disposal that we could use towards that, but we're trying to be very thoughtful, careful, but also reactive and proactive as much as we can. So happy to answer any questions.
I think we talked about it at the retreat a little bit here, but I think for many of us, this labor market is like nothing we've ever seen. And I've been at this nearly 40 years now. I've never seen anything like this. So we are asking council support here for a couple of different strategies here, at least to manage for the year.
Well, I think we're getting ahead of it, that's what counts.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Not be overwhelmed.
3/4%, right?
Well, I think maybe. And fair question, right? I think that that's part of the one-time monies because
What was your question, Stephen?
I'm sorry, it was 0.75% enough?
In the earlier conversation, we talked about when we went through and we analyzed the market through a benchmarking process, through what the whole metro area is doing, all lumped in together. And then we also did by job title, so we could see, and the range is from about 5% to 29%, just shy of 30%. So when we have the dollars that we have, it's gonna be really helpful in some areas, and so we need that other pool of money, because if we lose someone's salary, 4.25%, but their market actually moved much more, we just have to be able to respond to that to be able to retain our people or to be competitive in the job offerings when we're trying to fill positions.
Seems like a real balancing act, because if something happens over here and affects people over here that maybe didn't go looking to get a job offer.
Yes. Balancing is, understatement. I think it is a real serious challenge here we're facing. It's hard.
The internal dynamics are really challenging, right? So if we're bringing someone in, the market philosophy really I'm just so thankful that council has supported that, because we haven't had to leapfrog people, and we do have tools available to us. But there's even times when we will look and say, what should we do for internals to make sure that they are feeling the same value as someone new coming to the organization. And that one-time money is really ideal and helpful in being proactive, getting ahead of it.
It's more financially efficient to keep people that wanna work here
99% of the time.
rather than
Right,
people
rather
that
than
wanna
trying to-
retire and leave and make us spend a lot of money to find a replacement. Just as an example.
We got 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We're almost done. I'm gonna have Keith come back up here again. So the next request is something that we
This
that
is brand new.
we haven't discussed with council about. And this is a grounds maintenance worker, and I'm gonna have Keith talk about the need there.
Yeah, they'll be out at 5 tomorrow morning plowing the sidewalks around city facilities, a grounds maintenance worker will. As you know, we've been in the process of going through and really upgrading all of the things that we do in public works. And one of those areas is grounds. We're working our way through, and we're just starting in streets right now. So grounds, we've been underway for about a year, changed the leadership there. And as part of that, one of the strategies that we have taken is very similar to what perhaps you've seen in engineering for us, where the prior philosophy here was to have a whole bunch of generalists. Whereas what we've done within engineering is we have really outstanding engineers, but we also have subject matter experts within certain critical areas like stormwater and things like that we have. So we carry that philosophy through. Within the grounds division, 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we did some horse trading in the budget, and it didn't work out for public works. We gave up a whole bunch of labor in exchange for a position, which we didn't get. So then we've been working through that since then. And so in our reorganization, what we're doing is we actually we added a specialty expert within the forestry area, an arborist that actually is a tree climber. So if you'd like to learn to tree climb, we'll offer that for you soon. But a tree climber, and we're beginning the process of a forestry master plan, an assessment of all those things. So we have a specialty area there. Likewise, we're doing the same thing in the horticulture wing, because we're gonna be changing how we address our plants, our irrigation, all of those kind of things. So we had an individual who was a grounds maintenance worker, and we worked with human resources. They have a master's in ecology, which is a perfect fit. And that was a hard one, it's 10 o'clock. And we reclassified that individual to a horticulturist lead worker, which took advantage of that opportunity. And so prior to all this, we were still short labor staffing. So what we're also doing is contracting out more work. And so this is a standard grounds maintenance worker that will need to do all those things, like make sure when Pat calls me all summer about the Bulls median, or other ones that everybody else calls me about. So this is a tactic for us to become better aligned with the services we have to provide, and also balance our portfolio in terms of what we contract out, what we keep in-house. And we're really poising ourselves to really jump on the irrigation master plan, the forestry master plan that we all have underway right now. So this just supports that effort. And we already put pre-emergent down on bowls, so we're good for the spring. so.
We have median issues in my neighborhood.
Yep, we got them all, don't worry.
We have street issues in Liberty Village.
Really? So, well, the ironic part is just, one of the things that you'll see coming up soon actually, is Mark and I were just talking about this, is we're gonna have Kelsey come and visit with you all and talk about where we're going in the grounds area, cause you have a whole series of services in this area, irrigation, medians, maintenance, that have never been talked about from a capital perspective. And most of your irrigation systems are older than a group of my employees, so we gotta start working on this.
In a situation like Kelly was going through, it's an ice rink, what, do we have a plan for something like that?
We're not building any ice rinks, but
I have them on my street.
I know, so as I've
Some rails around it.
joked with several of you already, this is a particular winter, we have literally hundreds of locations in the city where we have ice issues, and there's a combination of things here. You know, I get the phone calls and people automatically assume it's drainage, but there's a huge number that are actually tied to people's tall trees and fences.
Will this person help with ice mitigation?
Actually, they work on the sidewalks, this crew, grounds crews, does all of our city facilities, trails and things like that, so the
But
trails.
will this new person help with that, ice mitigation?
Not in the streets.
No.
So what we do is, in the ice, people get a little roughed up when we say, hey, we'll put you on the list, but that's the reality, it's a combination of issues. People don't take well to saying, this would be really helpful if you cut your tree down.
Yeah, I got a point of order,
So,
council rules say that we have.
I know, hang on.
So we're gonna take all the broken ice, pile it in Aberdeen Village.
Are you addressing the point of order?
Yeah,
Because at 10 o'clock, that's why we have to,
I understand that, Jerry.
thank you.
So just council okay going a few minutes past 10? Great.
Yep.
So we're out there, we have a list where we have high priority ones, and we're also, this is a SpaceWorks asset management GIS play role, because we're matching all of that up, it'll help us with our capital plan, and we have some tricks in the trade we're gonna try here soon in a few areas, but we only have one grader and one crew.
Blue torch.
That doesn't do much, cause then I gotta go fix the asphalt afterwards, very good.
What asphalt?
Tiffany, this 550,000 is all coming out of the sales tax increase that we walked away with from last year, $2.5 million over.
Yes, yes, with a portion of it coming from utilities,
Yeah, right.
that one position.
Unless, I don't see any dissent from any council on any of these issues,
No.
so.
What about the cameras for the police officers and someone to maintain?
Next week.
That's another, yeah,
Is that next week?
Let's talk next week.
it's coming up in the next.
Next Tuesday, we're asking council to approve the contract.
Yeah, for the 5 years.
But we've already budgeted though for
We've gotten a couple of grants for the actual cameras, and then we've already approved and incorporated the actual personnel into the 5-year plan. Yep. Okay, and with that, so direction is, staff will bring and add to the budget amendment on second reading on March 1st for the appropriation of the remaining ARPA. We will also bring an appropriation for the carryover encumbrances and then the additional 2022 budget requests that were discussed. And then sewer and storm drainage will come on April 5th.
Good. Alright,
Okay.
thank you. Alright, any update from the city manager?
Well, I did send, an email here to council. I probably need to explain a little bit deeper here. It actually came from, our historic downtown group.
Historical Tonique.
Thank you. And, also, Larry Borger and Charlie Bloston. And it was a draft letter that I have to request for council. If you read the thing, it says Kyle named as the mayor at the very end. Well, this was just at their request.
Oh, that's what you were talking
Yeah,
about.
I didn't write that.
It's not the mayor's letter.
I didn't see that.
And so I think in my response to council, I just noted that, this is a conversation that staff's having with the city of Inglewood here. So I don't see us needing any immediate action, but we're certainly gonna evaluate their request. And we'll report back to council at some later point.
So that hasn't been sent.
No, so they sent 2 letters to Mark.
I
One of
read
them was a
them.
letter to us, and then they said, well, we'll just save you the time, and we'll write a letter that, we'll put your name on it, that you can then send on to
And you
Inglewood.
haven't sent
It's
that.
all ready,
no.
all ready to roll.
Thank you for clarification.
The engineering evaluation.
I thought, wow, you sent this letter, I'm
Yeah,
all
I
impressed.
said, wow,
Say what?
I was
That's one way to get something appropriated.
you good?
That's it.
City attorney, do you have any update?
Well, based upon that, I will say that the city does have an IGA with Inglewood. And as part of that IGA back in 2012, it contemplated two things. One, that Inglewood would be piping that ditch. And two, it basically called out the city of Littleton for any attempts to, I guess, designate this as historic. And that, we have trail usage along the city ditch. And we were basically understood to know that that was incidental to the right of the city of Inglewood to secure the water supply. So, depending on where our discussions lead in the future, it will be an interesting conversation with the city of Inglewood, depending on council direction. So, no other reports, thank you.
Is that coming to us at any time soon?
We are still in the process of working with the city of Inglewood, getting information on that.
I'm guessing late spring, probably have an update, it's my guess.
Alright, we're adjourned at 10:04.
Okay, thank you.
Drive carefully, Kelly.
Don't drive too fast, Kelly.
Yeah, really.